folks. This is Informed Dissent, and this is your news of the week for the week of February 7th, 2026. The FTC hires former New York Assistant Attorney General Glenna Goldis after her firing from the New York Attorney General's office over internal objections to pediatric gender medicine. New York jury awards $2 million to detransitioner in the first successful malpractice trial over youth gender surgery. The American Society of Plastic Surgeons formally recommends delaying gender-related surgeries until adulthood. And the American Medical Association says gender surgeries for minors should, quote, generally be deferred to adulthood. And then in Minnesota, a children's hospital, Children's Minnesota, pauses puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for patients under 18 amid federal funding pressure. This week in our deep dive, Jamie, Cori, and I break down this cascade of developments that unfolded in rapid succession: a New York jury malpractice verdict, major medical organizations reversing course on youth gender surgeries, and a pediatric hospital pausing medical interventions under federal pressure. We also took a brief look at patient-facing spaces like Reddit to see whether families are already reporting canceled or delayed surgeries, noting that while anecdotal, these discussions often surface institutional shifts before they appear in official statements. Taken together, the legal, medical, and cultural signals suggest a consensus, once treated as untouchable, is now beginning to fracture. Joining us this week, our guest is attorney Gabe Walters from the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE for short. Great organization. We will be discussing with him the DIAG case, the free speech and civil liberty issues it raises, and why the ability to question, critique, and dissent matters, especially when professionals and organizations raise evidence-based concerns in a highly politicized medical landscape. And now, on to the show.
Ow! Are you okay?
I just got bit.
Wow, what a way to start. The cat is already biting. Hi, Cori.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Before we begin, I must make a announcement. There is a sick 4-year-old in this house today. He just finally picked a movie because Bluey would not keep advancing to the next episode. But if he interrupts, that's where I'm going.
All right, forewarned.
Thank you. Would you like to introduce thyselves? Oh, I'm Jamie Reed, whistleblower from a pediatric gender center.
And I am Lauren Legere, co-executive director of the LGB Courage Coalition.
And I am Cori Cohn. I communicate about my experiences with having experienced medical transition and try to warn other people about the dangers.
You're having a whole mess of cat lap issue right now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. This was a really giant week. How is
What
everyone
happened this week?
feeling?
Giant because of the lawsuit?
The lawsuit, then the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, then the AMA, then what the APA said. I
The
think
APA?
well, they didn't say a whole lot, but there were 3 pretty big stories this week.
Wow.
Did you follow them?
I guess 3 out of 4. I missed the APA one.
Well, the APA, it basically was like American Society of Plastic Surgeons. I don't know this acronym by heart. Let me write it down so I know how to say it. American Society of Plastic. Oh, ASPS.
ASPS. Yeah.
Ugh, that reminds me of those weird commercials for the dogs that are like starving.
Yeah, that's the ASPCA.
Okay, well,
In the arms of the
oh my God, please don't.
angel.
Please don't. Maybe
Fly
stop, please. We
Yeah.
might need our own campaign like that.
away.
that will have a
I
brain.
was just gonna say something totally inappropriate, and I'm not going
For
to.
just $5 a month, you can help a detransitioner afford replacement hormones.
Oh my God.
Oh God.
Have Sarah McLachlan playing over like little gay kids in cages.
Yeah,
Wait,
somebody needs to get them out of Boy George's basement. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
it's beyond time.
We're not making any friends with this intro.
okay. So where do we want to start? Do we want to start with the lawsuit?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
big.
Yeah,
It
let's
was
start with the
big.
lawsuit. Yeah.
I think most people in the gender world have heard of this or have heard what happened, but I think some of the interesting elements for me was timeline. So there's so many elements. Okay. Timeline was one. What interventions she had was also of interest to me. So this was a young woman. The court hearing was in upstate New York. I believe she lives in New York. And she underwent a mastectomy at the age of 16. After being in therapy for about 2 years, the therapist wrote a single page, like 3 paragraph letter of support, sent it over to the surgeon. The surgeon proceeded to um, do the radical bilateral mastectomy. And part of what was determined to be a poor standard of care is the surgeon never picked up the phone and spoke to the referring therapist. Um, she never went on any hormones, which it,
So was this a non-binary per
no.
um no.
Well, it depends on, I think, when you ask, but according to the therapist, she said that she was identifying as a boy, but then was also referred to a quote LGBTQ center where there was some documentation that she told them that she was still unsure of her gender identity, but that therapist never talked to them either. And she had surgery. And what is of note about timing is she went on to file this medical malpractice within the statute of limitations. Like she was in within the time frame because she's now 22, and it was filed in 2023 was when the case was first filed, and then it was settled in 2026 with a jury settlement of $2 million, 6.1 for past harm and suffering, and $400,000 for future medical needs.
Sounds
And
good.
and the reason we know a lot of this is that um, Ben Ryan attended the hearing, went in person and attended.
Our former guest.
Yes, yes. Why do you think it sounds good? Do you think it was a good outcome?
I mean, I would like $2 million and another $400,000 for having been cut up as a teenager. That would be pretty nice. But
Are there some like legal like so are they saying yeah, shut up, Corey. Um
I know I get that a lot lately.
No.
well, so what I think is what I want to know is how they base this on like they're saying that there was a failure to adhere to the standards of care.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
what were they using to gauge those standards of care? Were they looking at the W path standards of care? Because
Yes,
and
they were.
she had received 2 years worth of therapy, and that's nowhere in W path. They also don't have age restrictions.
Well, interesting concepts. So at least two people testified on her behalf, including the president-elect of WPATH and Erica Anderson, both saying this was outside of what they would refer to as their standard of care.
Wait, the currently incoming president, but this testimony would have been in 2023?
No, the hearing just ended, and it was his name is, it's not Olson Kennedy. While I look this up,
Sure.
Lauren, one of the big issues in the determination was in the letter of support from the therapist. He listed diagnoses for this young person. You know, anxiety was in there, I believe, generalized anxiety. But instead of using the diagnostic code for gender dysphoria, he used body dysmorphia, which is why WPATH and Erica in part said, "Oh no, this was outside of that he didn't diagnose gender dysphoria." So,
Well, are you suggesting that this would create a very narrow reading of this lawsuit, which only people who've been through medicalization where their diagnosis was body dysmorphia will have a chance of getting any sort of fair settlement from the surgeons who hurt them?
her attorneys struck I guess their legal position or what they tried to do, which they won on, was they were saying this was pure med mal. They were not going after the concept of, a gender transition itself. They were saying purely that in this case, she was not provided what a reasonable, competent provider would have done.
Is there a such thing as a reasonable and competent provider in the gender space?
Right,
I
that's a
think
question for another lawsuit, I think, because I mean, no, yeah.
So the way that we try to reason this out is we say, all right, let's start with this plaintiff and figure out the difference between her and what a reasonable case would look like. So what would that take? A reasonable case, I guess the subject can't be, or I guess the doctors need to communicate much more. Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's weird. See, that's bizarre to me because what this raised for me was that where I work, okay, like if I look back where I worked, did we ever pick up the phone when we had a therapist write us a letter to put someone on a puberty blocker or cross-sex hormone? How often did we ever pick up the phone and call that therapist? Do you have a
I'm gonna
guess?
guess never.
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
guess
guess
every
never.
time.
I can distinctly remember three cases where there was ever communication with the therapist above and beyond the letter. One case, I remember distinctly the therapist calling the endocrinologist and telling him not to initiate testosterone. The puberty blocker was already in. Don't do it. And he screamed at the therapist on the phone that she was wrong. Um, we
Um,
we didn't routine. We weren't having. In fact, one of the therapists asked for a consultation, and I remember the endocrinologist scoffing at it, being like, "Ugh, I don't have time for this. Why would I be doing this?"
I have a question though. So this settlement was awarded to this young woman through a jury.
Yes.
These are just regular people. They came in and heard this tale. of what happened to this young woman and were like, this is egregious. Is it possible that they just heard what they heard and were like, this is just egregious? Like, who's going to come in? Like, these are just lay people. And if they come in, did they ever during the is there any, there's a written transcript, I imagine. Is anywhere during the trial, did they actually lay out what WPATH standards of care are?
I'm assuming yes.
How do we get our fingers on the trial material?
Yeah,
Well,
it would be
Ben Ryan has
interesting.
published some. He's published some of the expert witness affidavits. The most of the material is sealed, but he had some of it.
Hmm.
But like I said, I mean, like Erica Anderson, I mean, I think he actually tweeted about it today was, I was part of this case and uh Erica wrote, I'm the psychologist expert witness who worked with Fox Varian and her attorney to win the case in New York. As I testified, he was wholly unqualified, failed to observe standards of care, and simply blew it with a 16-year-old questioning her gender.
Maybe we should invite Dr. Anderson on.
It wouldn't be a bad idea. We could try.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway,
Ben Ryan wrote about Erica. Erica landed blow after blow on Kenneth Einhorn, who is the psychologist, for what was characterized as shoddy and rush care. I also just I don't see this as rushed, but I just,
Right, she actually received way more therapy than a lot of these kids do.
way
Way,
more.
way more. 2 years is a lot. I mean, you know from your clinic there have been kids that have been medicalized after one visit.
Oh, single visit with a therapist had the letter written.
oh, the Indianapolis Gender Clinic at Eskenazi, or sorry, at Riley, uh, told, I think it was Reuters. Oh yeah, the kids already come in knowing everything that they need to know about the hormones, so we don't see any reason not to prescribe them on their first visit.
So this was a case of surgery, but if if anyone's going to try to argue that there is a WPATH standard of care and that the standard of care meant that there should be whatever you refer to as slow, deliberate, long process, like I wager that nearly every kid in at least a 2 to 3 year period didn't have that. If they had something that was lengthy and slow, and that would have been the outlier, not the standard.
And all this would have been under WPATH 7
Right,
instead of WPATH 8,
right.
which WPATH 7 was a little bit more structured than WPATH 8.
In different ways. Um, SOC 8 SOC 8 did extend or tried to extend the length of time one should identify as trans, whereas in SOC 7, the clinicians I worked with interpreted it as you had to identify as trans for at least 6 months.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. Oh, and then when I would ask, how are we verifying the 6 months? They didn't care. It was perfectly fine if I did an intake and the mom said, kid just started identifying 3 weeks ago. If kid comes in to the visit and says, oh, I didn't tell anybody, but I've been identifying like this since
Yeah.
a year ago, then that was good enough for the clinicians. That was, oh yeah, no verification, no corroboration, nothing outside of the adolescent's self-report. And these adolescents are not dumb. They would know, oh, I have to say I've identified like this for this long.
Yeah, it's all a game. It's a pretty well-known game. Not saying that all the adolescents know the game, but most of them do. Because they're all
So
they're all friends. They're all friends with the trans. All their friends are trans.
I think this verdict, this judgment, Though I don't, it's not perfect. It's clearly not going to solve all our problems. It has brought to the public the fact that like mistakes can be made. And that for the longest time has been the trans narrative is that you just it's innate and you just know who you are.
Or that if you change your mind, it's just part of your gender journey. It's just another part of the
Right.
journey. Not
So
that
as
it,
imperfect as this judgment is, I'm very happy for this young person. I mean, they deserve this and more, in my opinion. And I think it has helped to open the floodgates. If it at least gives people hope that they can get some justice. I think that's a good thing. But honestly, I have a feeling that like you're talking about juries. These are just regular people, and they're gonna listen to the stories of these kids, and none of them are gonna say, "Well, they followed all the medical guidelines, so I mean, that's just not gonna happen. These interventions are completely beyond the pale, so we just got to get more lawsuits."
Um, Jamie, imagine that you're back in the clinic that you were at,
oh
and
yeah.
you had just heard about this verdict. In your role, what would you be doing like that week? I'm sure there's meetings that would be happening at that clinic.
Yeah,
Uh,
what's it look like inside the clinic if
yeah.
this verdict just came down?
It's a great question, Corey. I have an example. Um, do you back to Erica Anderson and Laura Edwards Leeper? Do you remember when that piece came out?
The interview with Leaper from.
No, no. When they first
Oh,
wrote
they wrote an op-ed.
Oh
wrote
yeah.
an op-ed. I was still deep in the gender center at that time. When that broke, what it didn't spark a meeting, it sparked a email chain. The the gender center's psychiatrist sent an email to the whole multidisciplinary team with the story, and she said, basically, this is really concerning because I can kind of see what they're saying. And their argument was that there was rush and that there was poorly trained mental health care and that all the mental health providers were just rubber stamping and she said, I think that there's some validity here. And um the endocrinologist fired back immediately, angrily defensive. And his take was, oh, sure, some people might be rushed and some people might be harmed. But if we don't operate like this, then other people are going to have their care move too slow and they
Can
might
I
be harmed
just can I
too.
just interrupt? This endocrinologist is the same one that when your gender clinic closed down, he moved to Colorado. So this man that you're quoting right now is in fact still operating this way, just in another state, correct?
Well, he moved to Colorado and started working at the True Center, and it is my understanding that that has been shut down because of some of the federal push. But
But
yes,
this
he
is his ethos. This is the
yes.
way he operates. So I'm sure he has found another clinic
Okay,
to go
but
to
but
already.
but his response too at that time was he said, I basically was trying to be like, well, I welcome if we want to have a discussion about this, but I don't want to have a general discussion. I want you to come back with a specific case. Tell me a specific case that you think we operated like Laura Edwards Leeper and Erica Anderson are alleging, and then we can talk about that. Um, I will readily admit that I have a little bit of a bitchy, I don't know, streak where if you tell me something like that, how do you think I responded?
Did
Um,
you deliver him several cases?
Oh, in rapid fire succession, I sent email number one. It said case number one that fits your description. MRN number, laid it out, said here's the first one. I sent another email about 5 minutes later. Case number two, MRN number, here's the description. I just kept firing them at him to the whole team. Bam, bam, bam. I mean, these were egregious cases that were like really upsetting that had been also debated and discussed previously. And finally he told me to stop. He was like, you have to stop. Because I could have probably right at that moment sent maybe 50 cases. Just like that. Like, yep, 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 yep. So in this scenario, if I was still, I mean, I was an outlier though, Cori. By that time, I was like, this is not right. But if there, if there's anybody similar to me in a gender center still operating, the first thing I would say is these are all the cases that we need to seriously review, that they match this young woman's experience that she ended up in this lawsuit.
Out of curiosity, did you ever contact that psychologist after you became a whistleblower?
The psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist, excuse me.
Um, no.
Mm.
They firewalled, they were all told and firewalled if they had any, basically, those that still worked there had the protection of the legal counsel of the hospital, barring that they had no contact with me. They could have jeopardized their own licensure and their own legal protections by the university.
All right. I hope the psychiatrist is still following your adventures and is building up some courage to say something. That's my
She
way.
wrote a paper about TikTok ticks. She published a research paper saying there is a social contagion with all of these kids thinking that they have Tourette's from TikTok.
Yeah, I bet she's right.
She was right. And when she said that, I said, do you think maybe it's possible that some of these same kids are finding trans in the same way? No, that's different.
Mm-mm.
No,
That's different, Jamie.
I am curious though, because the lawsuit then led to the ASPS. Are there surgeries scheduled that are being canceled? Are surgeons still going to move forward? Half the states were a little bit less than half the states were still allowing minor surgeries.
Mm.
Yeah, minors who have surgery. So in this statement from the ASPS, have they changed their actual guidelines?
Okay.
So this was a statement, but in their actual guidelines, is this now coming down through the ranks? You will not do surgery on under 19. That is our guideline.
So I think we need to clarify.
Could I
Yeah, jump in.
I just thought, what I ought to do is just go onto Reddit and search for the exact phrase top surgery canceled.
Oh, you should.
2 posts in the last 2 days. One of them says top surgery canceled due to that fuck ass hoe from New York.
Whoa.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
You want me to read this? I haven't.
Yes.
I haven't.
Yes, I can't. Okay, yes, please.
Rant from. Oh no, I'm gonna have to show my age here. From Mad Pineapple 28.
Oh my God.
Maybe trigger warning for young transitioner. I know that triggers some people. And trigger warning for healthy weight loss mention. Canceled due to my age and met my case in New York. I'm just sad. I was looking forward to a lot for obvious reasons. I was looking forward to exploring more gender expression, aka zesty man style. I don't know. It was next week. I prepared myself for the healing. I was angry last night when the news was delivered and said a lot of nasty things. I don't necessarily regret it, though. I probably should. I thought maybe there was some hope in being trans, but obviously not. I was right when I began. Being trans is just a sick joke. True. I put on tape last night and had a brief moment of euphoria after binding for so long to prep for the surgery. Now it's worn off and I'm just upset. I hate my chest, obviously. I'm looking into surgery in Mexico to see if I can get it at my age instead of having to wait. I was overweight and worked on losing some weight, and it got easier to tape, So that'll make it easier for me, I guess. I had a distraction art project, fursuit. I planned to finish after the surgery as I didn't get it done leading up to it. I'll probably get that done now. I'm tired. I'm trying to find the silver lining at the moment, but I'm still in shock. It will be over, I know. And she does not list her age, so I don't know.
Yeah, because
I
there's
don't
some
know.
weird like she's referencing her age as either too young or I would assume it's too young.
And her description of her,
But otherwise, the picture of mental health clearly.
well, yes,
What was the other one? You said there was one other one?
there was, and it has a bunch of comments on it. I know this is riveting content for our
Well,
listeners to be.
I'm interested because I hadn't thought
I
to
am
do
too.
this.
Are
I
there
am
any more
also.
that say fuck ass hoe? Because that's a hilarious phrase, and I might be using it
No, no,
going
nope,
forth.
nope.
I I would like you to start introducing yourself on this program with that description, Lauren.
What's the other Reddit post?
I'm looking. Top surgery canceled 2 days ago. I was 5 days away from getting top surgery, and it has been canceled because of the American Society of Plastic Surgery statement last night that under 19s should not receive
Wow.
gender affirming surgeries. I got a call from my surgeon that my surgery will likely be canceled because I'm under 19. I feel upset and just looking for some support. Broken heart. I'm sorry that sucks. I feel you, dude. Make sure they reschedule you now for the earliest available slot that exists for once you turn 20. This is not a law, it is a recommendation. It's not even a clinical guideline. Say to your surgeon, I have read the statement from ASPS and it said it was not intended to be a clinical guideline, and I can find no legislation barring myself, an adult, from receiving this surgery. Can you please explain why it was canceled? So they're already brainstorming their workarounds, which, of course, if you're willing to travel to California or Washington, I have the names of 3 surgeons that perform on those under 18. I should copy this and see if we want to ask this person for that information. Yeah, that's good information to have. Which I will. I'll throw that into our channel. This exact same thing happened to me for my hysterectomy. It had to be rescheduled 5 days before it was supposed to happen. Get your surgery rescheduled to as soon as after you turn 19 as possible. That is pretty interesting.
I think that's really interesting to me that the response is that the delay is okay, but to not there's no pausing or thinking or considering something else. It's just schedule it as soon as now you can.
Yeah, well, obviously, like they're looking for the workarounds. Here's the thing that I can tell you. When you start through this process, you have this huge goal. You have a plan to achieve the goal. And the promise is that if you can achieve the goal, you will be happy. So nobody who's really happy or satisfied with their life tries to transition. And the idea that you can chase down the rainbow to find the pot of gold at the end is really compelling. So nothing is going, like no information, like this is evil adults who are trying to
I know.
ruin people's happiness is how the only way that they're going to see it. Nothing's going to trigger them going, wow, if these medical associations are suggesting that I shouldn't have surgery, maybe I should rethink the certain. No, it's these are trolls who are standing between you and the end of the rainbow. So you have to move around them.
So one of the Reddit responders is correct. This is a position statement on gender surgery for children and adolescents. It is not a quote clinical guideline. They're correct, if they're in a state where the law hasn't changed. But I think what's interesting is this does circle back to Fox Varian
Uh-huh.
because if the position statement is this, and a surgeon proceeds on a minor, they are going outside of the position of the plastic surgeons.
Right. And if any lawsuit was ever brought, they would have to explain why they went outside those
Yeah,
stated positions of their organization.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I would also surmise that a number of surgeons they have hospital privileges to conduct surgery. The hospitals themselves might be saying they won't book these. So,
Wow, this is so dark.
uh-oh, does it get worse?
It's just there's a Reddit subreddit called Top Surgery, and it's just full of posts, just even in the last day, of obviously young women who have had the surgery
In their photos.
in their photos. And there's out of all of these so far, there's one who sort of maybe looks masculine, but these all look like the torsos of young women that have been
Yeah.
damaged. None of these, I don't know what these girls are expecting, but they just look like girls that have had mastectomies. They don't look like men. Doing sexy pose with your mastectomy is not helping matters.
No. Should we catch people up on the other news too?
Yeah.
Good news, Glenna got a job.
Yes.
What? Who's
Friend
Glenna?
friend of the pod, Glenna Goldis, who was recently shut up, Cori. You're such a pain in the ass. Glenna Goldis, friend of the pod, who was recently fired from her New York Attorney General job, was just hired by the Trump administration for the FTC, where she will get to investigate the very thing that she had been speaking out about, consumer fraud in the gender medical industry. So good for Glenna.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, as someone said the other night, fuck around and find out.
Well, there hasn't been any find out yet. She just got
Not
another
yet.
job.
Yeah. No, but Glenna's the perfect person for this job, so we wish her well.
We do.
I
It's
I
good
did not
news.
get around to publishing my 2,000 word takedown of her before she got a new job,
Got
so
hired. Well,
I'm not going to try.
some things are best left unsaid.
Yeah.
So the ASPS, is that right? Yeah, it's just still,
Yeah, ASPS. Oh, and then
and then
that
the
trickled
AMA,
down.
yes. Also, just because I'm obsessed with the New York Times, I need to find out more about Andrew Jacobs. He is the writer who wrote the three pieces this week. Amy Harmon disappeared, apparently. She's not
Uh-oh.
there. Um, he wrote the pieces regarding Fox Fox's case and then the ASPS. It says I'm a reporter for the New York Times focused on how healthcare policy, politics, and corporate interests affect people's lives. And small note, because like I said, I'm obsessed with the New York Times. A zine got a byline. Is that the way it's said? A byline?
Yeah, she helped write the article, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it said at
Yeah.
the very bottom in tiny print, assistance basically by Azine Gracie. So she jumped in here too. I don't know what this means, but I found that quite interesting. Um, the pieces were not great, I will say. I mean, are they ever? The thing that was of note to me is that I always wonder who they're going to quote for these stories. All of the stories quoted Kinnan McKinnon, Kinnan Ross McKinnon.
Who's that?
Well, Kinnan Ross McKinnon is a social scientist who studies transgender medicine at York University in Toronto and is a trans-identified woman. She's been doing detransitioner research studies.
Yes. I would say that she is one of the foremost researchers of detransition.
I could give her that. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I don't
Mm, researcher. Okay. Wasn't this
know.
the same person that said they're not transing away the gay because heterosexual women who transition identify as gay men and heterosexual men who transition identify as lesbians? I don't know that I'm trusting the results of this research.
I like Kinnan.
I mean, I'll throw her a bone. She has been a little more honest than the rest of them, but
See different viewpoints.
yeah.
You're what you like, Kenan?
I do.
Do you want to elaborate on that or just
Look, anybody who tries to do research in this area has had their careers basically torpedoed. And it usually does not happen visibly. What happens is that your funding requests get turned down, your colleagues complain about your research, you lose any sort of influence inside of your department.
but none of those things happened to her
Right.
because she's
So,
trans-identified.
right.
Okay.
So somebody, look, I feel a kindred soul in
Yeah.
Kinnan, which is you have some identity shields, use those for good. And that's what she's doing. So I respect that.
Okay. Well,
Disagree.
All right. Well, this whole format is designed for us to have disagreement. So I appreciate you being so forthright.
Yeah. And
well,
then
go ahead.
are we going on to the AMA? Because the AMA also subsequently put out
Yeah.
was this
Well,
another position? Was this a
no.
statement?
Okay.
The
Okay.
American Medical Association.
The AMA, the nation's largest organization representing doctors, basically agreed with the ASPS on Wednesday, saying these procedures generally should be deferred until patients reach adulthood. Um, it was interesting because the AMA's response was a journalist reached out to them, and this was their response given as their kind of statement. As far as I know, as of now, they have not published a full um, position or policy statement like ASPS did, but they put out a statement.
Hmm.
My my bigger questions here, will any of the other smaller societies back away? So I have no idea what we're going to see from the Endocrine Society. They are due to put out a new guideline. They acknowledged how low quality the previous one was, so I don't know what they're going to put out. I don't think that the American Academy of Pediatrics is going to budge, and that leaves all of the smaller, so the American Psychological, the American Psychiatric, like all of these little ones. The Are they going to change their guidelines to reflect the ASPS? That this is actually an interesting question. If any of our listeners are therapists or work in any of these fields and are part of their uh, societies, I'd be interested if they would be willing to send an email up the chain and ask, are we going to reflect ASPS? So
Well, things are changing no matter what.
They are.
we need to keep watching if surgeries keep being canceled too. Um,
Yep. Gotta keep an eye out on those Reddit forums.
can I, Cori, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Okay. First I'll preface it with when I read when I read when I read the story, I broke down in tears and cried for a long time. Um, do you, for people who are outside of the window for like you're outside of the window for medical malpractice, right?
Oh yeah.
If that window changed, would you pursue a case?
Well, it's impossible. My providers are dead and buried. But no.
You wouldn't?
I mean, if it were technically possible to do
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it would be very difficult. You know, filing a case like this requires a lot of evidence. If you cannot bring the evidence, and if what you're claiming is there's an absence of evidence, right? My doctor did not talk to my therapist. How do you prove that? That's a negative. So how do you prove it? You have to do a lot of
Oh,
work
yeah.
to for in discovery to prove that. And nobody's going to even take your lawsuit as far as a discovery if there's not a really good chance that you already have um, some momentum for a lawsuit. So getting into a lawsuit is psychically taxing. The the people who are going to pursue legal remedies are the ones who feel that they cannot move on with their life given what they've experienced, and they really need that money because there's not really a way of surviving without it. Those are the ones who are going to need these types of remedies. The people who've been hurt, like me and a lot of our friends that we know, we are moving on with our lives. And even though we've been hurt in cosmic ways that most people cannot or will not be able to understand, nevertheless, we've got shelter, we've got a means of a livelihood, we have all of the things that we've got to survive. And it's really the people who aren't even able to secure those types of things because maybe their bottom surgery made them so disabled they can't even leave the house, which is rare, but not unheard of at all. Those are the ones that are going to really need these types of remedies.
But they're also the ones who are least likely to be able to handle like you said, it's very psychically taxing, and
Right.
it does require a fair amount of mental fortitude
And
and
support.
support, right? And yeah,
I
When when I started co-founded the Gender Care Consumer Advocacy Network, we knew about these types of people who are being hurt. And we wanted to create a network of experts who would testify on their behalf and a network of attorneys who would be willing to take these types of cases. But we just could not get the momentum to even get that far.
do you think this most recent settlement gives some momentum? Because there are now law firms dedicated to helping
Yeah.
people who have been harmed by this.
It would be 10 times or 20 times easier to start something like GC Can today.
Yeah.
But, we would have to, anybody who tried to start from that should learn the lessons that we did. One of them is that there's an almost paranoia among the trans community that is it Stockholm syndrome? What is it where
Where you
trauma
start,
bonding?
yeah,
That
trauma bonding with your captors. That's
like
Stockholm.
they will protect these providers at all costs. Even if they've hurt their friends, they'll still protect the providers at all costs. They'll throw their bodies in front of bullets for these providers. And that's not something that I thought would be the case, because a lot of these young people are they have an ideology that's so anti-capitalist, but they have a really surprising carve out for this particular aspect of capitalism, which is unlimited body modification.
I'm willing to be an expert witness in anybody's case like this. And as soon as I saw Fox's outcome, I just hope that so many more people will sue now.
It's still going to be hard to do it. What's going to take is, so maybe the best case is won. Now the next best case has to win. And then the next best case has to win in order to really create the platform needed to build momentum where these lawsuits become a genuine threat that touches the entire practice.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
But the second one is around the corner, I'm sure. In fact, we know some of the plaintiffs in some of these lawsuits.
We do.
So we're rooting for them. We hope that they prevail.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Should we prepare for our guest?
Yeah, all right, fuck assholes. We gotta prepare for our guest in a few minutes, and I have to.
Can I introduce our guest as, please welcome this fuck ass hoe?
No. And you know what? This is a very short story. I used to listen often to Bar Pod.
Oh, I
Is
remember.
this a story about you being a fuck ass hoe?
I get in the car one day and I turn on the car and Bar Pod comes on and it's like the middle of some episode and Katie Herzog says something very similar to what you just said. And all the kids in the car were like, Mom, what the heck what are you listening to? She just said all of these bad words. And I was like, oh my God.
Should we put a disclaimer on the beginning that we say fuck ass hoe a bunch in this episode? So if you're listening around your kids, don't.
Oh,
All right.
Maybe we could bleep it.
wait, this is actually a great segue. We're going to go into talking about free speech.
Oh.
All right. For all the fuck ass hoes out there, on to free speech.
Bye. Welcome back, listeners, to our second half of Informed Dissent. If you were with us before, you already heard my warning, but I'm going to give my warning again. We have a sick 4-year-old home. He is currently watching, I don't know what he's watching on Disney. Is it Bolt? I think he's watching Bolt. But he might come up and bother us. And a tiny little humorous segue. His favorite movie right now is called Turning Red. Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Which is basically about a 13-year-old girl getting her period. So I call it Period Panda Movie, and he loves it.
So every time we're like, what will you watch? Will you watch Red? And he was like, I don't know. Will you watch Period Panda? And he's like, yes. So hopefully he doesn't bother us. I'm Jamie Reed, whistleblower from a pediatric gender center. I'm going to let my co-hosts introduce themselves and then we'll have our guests jump in.
And I am Lauren Legere, co-executive director of the LGB Courage Coalition.
I am Cori Cohn, a fun person to hang around in the gender space.
Gabe, would you like to take it?
I'm Gabe Walters. I'm an attorney for the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE for short. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you so much. So we want to start off with some basics before we get into the specifics of the case that we wanted you to talk about. So what is FIRE? When was it started? What do you kind of do?
Sure.
Yeah.
FIRE is an advocacy organization for the freedom of speech. It is nonpartisan, which means that our clients run the ideological spectrum from left to right and everything in between. We were founded in 1999, and until 2022, FIRE worked primarily on college campuses to support student free speech and also faculty free speech and academic freedom and also due process rights. In 2022, we expanded our mission beyond the campus setting to apply in all areas of life where the freedom of speech protects us and might be under threat from nefarious state actors.
So, Gabe, it used to be that if you had a free speech case, you would go to the
A different
ACLU.
org. Yeah.
Are you seeing a shift, and is FIRE's inception because you saw a shift in the way that the ACLU is advocating for people in terms of free speech?
Well, I think initially there was a good idea to focus on college campuses because of the proliferation of speech codes, codes that would purport to ban so-called hate speech on college campuses. And as I'm sure we all know, hate speech is always in the eye of the beholder, and hate speech codes were often turned against the students that they were at least initially meant to protect. But in recent years, we saw a need for the expansion beyond campus. The ACLU, of course, still brings First Amendment free speech cases, but that is one of many issue areas that the ACLU focuses upon. And so FIRE, as a single issue organization, is able to pick up quite a lot of that work. And unfortunately, there's plenty of work to be spread around.
I don't want to go on a let's attack the ACLU tangent here. So, was there something special in 1999 that triggered the inception of FIRE?
We were founded by Charles Allen Coors and Harvey Silverglate. Coors is a non-lawyer professor, and Silverglate is a longtime civil rights attorney in Massachusetts who was also a board member of the state ACLU affiliate there. And I think they saw a need to protect academic freedom on campus. And really, I think that grew out of the political correctness movement of the 1990s. And hence the college campuses were like the central battlegrounds in that fight, right? With this proliferation of speech codes. And so that was really, I think, the impetus behind our founders starting up FIRE. I joined the organization in 2021, so right at the tail end of our exclusive focus on college campuses. So unfortunately, I'm not the best guest to speak to the wide history that occurred between 99 and 22. Yeah, I think there was basically this need that the founders saw, and they thought they would knock this out and be able to wind down operations in a few years. And that, of course, proved to be not true. And not only has FIRE grown into an organization of roughly 150 staffers, but we started an in-house litigation project. And so now I think we have something like, I don't know, somewhere between 10 to 15 litigators working full time in the courts, in addition to our campus rights advocacy team that continues to focus on the rights of students and faculty members in college. So that's still very much core to what we do, even after our mission has expanded beyond.
And you personally are an attorney. And then Cori, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say the ACLU used to have the sort of culture where under Ira Glasser, the very, very long time director of it up until I guess the teens, 20 teens sometime, it was very much a culture of every person's civil rights need to be defended, no matter who they are, as long as they are expressing their civil rights, or as long as they're being infringed upon by the government, we're going to stand for them. That was very much the culture. You've now been with FIRE for 5 years. Can you like tell us about the fire culture or if it's changed since the mission has changed?
Yeah, the culture has not changed, and the mission has changed only insofar as we're no longer limited to college campuses. But the motto basically is if the speech is protected by the First Amendment, we will defend it without regard to the content of that speech, without regard to whether we agree with or like our clients. If it's protected, we'll defend it.
Cool.
Admirable.
I I'm still slightly amused that it was the ACLU that came after me and tried to
Yeah.
subpoena my phone and get into all of my records. But that's and they wanted all of the contact I had with journalists too. It just boggles my mind. But Gabe, you personally are an attorney.
I am.
And is there, pardon my ignorance around attorneying, is there a certain kind of law that you studied that leads into this kind of work?
Oh, well, I went to University of Virginia School of Law, where there are a number of courses offered by faculty who specialize in First Amendment law. So I had classes with the great Vince Blasi, Micah Schwartzman. I didn't have a class with the now Dean Leslie Kendrick, but she's a First Amendment scholar. I had a class with Lillian Bevere, who's now retired. So it was just a wonderful place to study First Amendment law. And I also focused on other human rights law, especially international human rights. And my first job out of law school actually was at the ACLU of Virginia affiliate, where I remain on the legal advisory board. And I served in that capacity during the events in Charlottesville of 2017, when they took that case defending their client Kessler, Jason Kessler, I want to say, and his right to organize a protest in the downtown Charlottesville City Park, where the Robert E. Lee statute was situated and was scheduled for removal. Of course, we all saw how those events unfolded, but the ACLU of Virginia defended his right and his group's right to speak in that park. And tragedy unfurled that day, and I wish the state and local police had kept protester and counter protesters separated. But that's really the impetus for a lot of the dissension within the ranks of the ACLU staffers toward freedom of speech and case selection, that you mentioned earlier, and that's been well covered in the press. So I don't feel
Yeah.
I need to say too much more about that,
Yeah.
except I'm proud that the ACLU affiliate took that case and defended the principle of the matter, regardless of how things took a real turn for the worse, tragically. From there, I went to the PETA Foundation, where I had no background in animal rights, but a lot of the First Amendment training I had from law school was put to good use defending an organization that is often seen as a controversial speaker. There was no shortage of First Amendment work to do on behalf of PETA, and I won some victories there, and set some precedents, and that got noticed by Fire. So at the time I applied to Fire, my now coworkers who interviewed me said, "Oh, hey, I was just reading one of your cases." So that was pretty cool.
So that kind of brings us to why we asked you to come on. So there was a case that was in the news a week ago, 2 weeks ago. It all has become a blur. Um, Lauren, do you remember where you found the article that was it out of Chicago itself?
Um, I'm not sure. Someone sent it to me, but it was about DIAG, which is a group of Democrats. They consider themselves Democrats. Their name, DIAG, stands for Democrats for an Informed Approach to Gender. And there was a lawsuit. DIAG is suing Illinois for the right to use the word Democrat because there is apparently some obscure law on the books from way back when saying that people cannot use the word Democrat or Republican unless they get the blessing of the official kind of bureaucratic party official stamp. Is that correct? Did I summarize that correctly, Gabe?
That is accurate. Before a nonprofit organization, or as far as I know, any organization can register to do business within the state of Illinois, if they have the word Democrat or Republican or some other phrases that are commonly associated with any other political party, they must obtain first the permission of that political party to use that word in their name. And of course, Democrats for an Informed Approach to Gender, or DIAG, and FIRE agree that you shouldn't have to ask a political party for permission to call yourselves what you are. Think about, log cabin Republicans, for example, or Democratic Socialists of America. I mean, we can think of all kinds of examples of organizations that have these words in their names and may or may not actually get the permission of the party officials because they might disagree on a particular issue with that party, right?
Right.
Okay,
So how was this how was this prompted? Did
wait, can
Illinois
I
take
ask?
can,
Did the Democratic Socialists of America get permission in Illinois from the Democratic Party? Do we
That
know?
I don't know for
Okay.
certain. I
Now,
think if I remember the reporting, which was in the Chicago Tribune correctly, the Democratic Party official who was interviewed said that there's never really been an issue, but then later said, that they strongly disagree with DIAG about gender issues. And so DIAG did not reach out to ask for permission because they think doing so would be futile. But not only that, they think they shouldn't have to, right? They have the First Amendment right to call themselves who they are, whatever they want, regardless of what that is, without the state saying, no, you have to get the stamp of approval of anyone first.
so did
and
something happen? Like did Illinois take action against DIAG and say, hey, you can't use this name? And then they
Yes.
responded with a lawsuit. Okay.
Yeah, DIAG applied to do business in the state of Illinois, which is a prerequisite before they can conduct fundraising as a nonprofit organization within the state. And so they really are prohibited from even spreading their message within the state because as a nonprofit organization, their message is so tied up with their ability to operate, which comes from, soliciting funds from supporters. So they applied 3 times and were rejected 3 times. And each time, because of what we call the party name provision, which is the statute we've been talking about.
And to your knowledge, has there been any other, like, for example, Democratic Socialists of America or any other group in Illinois that has been denied their, I guess, application to do business in the state because they use the word Democrat or even Republican because it's both parties. So to your knowledge, has there been any other organizations that have received pushback from the state of Illinois under this?
Yes. Yes. According to the Tribune article, back in the 80s, if I remember correctly, there was an organization called the Republican Fund that was prohibited from doing business in Illinois and filed a lawsuit. The reporting is not clear as to what happened with that lawsuit. Maybe it settled, maybe it was voluntarily dismissed. I'm not really sure. That's something we'll be digging into, of course, as the case proceeds.
Great.
do other states have similar provisions?
No, this is the only state so far where DIAG has encountered this hurdle. It is registered to conduct affairs in 37 other states. And it, of course, wishes to conduct affairs in Illinois and meet with donors and supporters there and to solicit funds and to spread its message, which is basically we're Democrats who disagree with the party on gender issues. And they believe that, the party has abandoned, what they would call sanity on these issues. And they want to bring what they think is a more reasoned approach, especially with regard to youth care. So they feel very strongly about that. It's not for me to take a position one way or the other on their beliefs, but I do believe strongly that they have the right to speak that belief into the world and to seek support for it. And so that's where FIRE comes in to defend their First Amendment right.
I can imagine a situation where somebody would come and create something like the Republican Fund. And create marketing materials called the Republican Fund and not make any sort of promises about where the money was going to go, and then use that all to fund Democratic candidates. So I can see the parties saying, it wouldn't surprise me if there was something like that had historically occurred, where the parties said, let's make an agreement together, we'll pass a law that prevents fraud by implying that they're acting as one of our parties. I mean, that seems very sensible that they would try to do something like that.
Well,
Yeah, do you have I'm
Oh,
sorry. Yeah,
sorry.
do you have any idea where this law came out of? Like, was there a particular incident that s- made them want to pass this law? Because it seems like it's odd.
I,
It's odd that there's no other state laws that have this on the books.
I don't know if there was a particular instance of fraud that was an impetus behind this statute, or whether it was mere protectionism of these words and claiming them to the benefit solely of these parties. Um, I would say that there are also charitable fraud laws on the books that would cover that kind of activity. If you're a charity and you promise your donors or supporters that their donation money will go toward a particular mission, and then you turn around and use it for something else, that's charity fraud. And there are criminal penalties for that. And the state has every power in the world to investigate that. That's obviously not what's going on with DIAG. Here we have, people who are actually Democrats and former Democrats and politically homeless Democrats who disagree over a set of issues related to gender, and they're not allowed to call themselves what they are and spread their message within the state. So there's no fraud here. You could possibly see that as a justification for the statute, but in that case, this is a statute that targets speech directly. So it has to satisfy strict scrutiny. And that means that the state has to have a compelling justification behind the statute. There has to be a need. And then the means by which it achieves that end have to be the least speech restrictive possible. And we know this is not the least speech restrictive possible because, as I said before, there's already charity fraud laws on the books.
There are a number of nonprofits that their names used to stand for something like GLAD or what are some of the other ones? The
Lambda Legal. Well, no,
P
was that
flag.
P flag, right? Some of these groups used to stand for something, like the ACLU. Could DIAG just call it in Illinois? Could they just call themselves DIAG, and then as part of their other activities, explain we are Democrats with these viewpoints, or are they stopped from even being able to do that as well?
That's a good question. There's something in the law about maybe using a doing business as name. I'm less up to speed on that provision, but the bottom line is that they shouldn't have to
Okay.
change their name. And you could see an argument that changing their name for one state versus 37 other states, or I assume they have plans to expand beyond the states, even that number. You can see an argument where that might give rise to some kind of like claim of fraud in some hypothetical world, right? I mean, they just want to call themselves what they are. They just want to spread their message that they're Democrats who feel like the party has shifted on this set of issues, and that has left them feeling a bit stranded in these beliefs, and they want to advocate for the party to adopt their beliefs. They have every right to do that, and they have every right to call themselves whatever they want, frankly, while they bring that message.
Are there some strong precedents that you're leaning on for your arguments?
Well, sure. I mean, there's all sorts of First Amendment law on the right to solicit charitable contributions, for example. There's case law on the issue that I said earlier, which is where you have a law that directly targets what people can say or not say, and does it in this viewpoint-based way that you apply what's called strict scrutiny, where the courts take a particularly discerning look at the constitutionality of that law. There's an adage that we learn in law school, which is strict in theory, fatal in fact, right? I mean, legislators just cannot target speech in this way. It's per se unconstitutional.
So you do feel confident that you guys have a good case?
Oh, absolutely.
And what would the result? So can DIAG operate in the state of Illinois until you get this settled, or are they
No,
kind of sidelined? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, they're not allowed to operate in Illinois until this issue is settled. To comply with that, they have directed donors or supporters whose IP addresses register in Illinois to a different landing page on the website where they're not allowed to submit um, contributions. We have filed what's called a preliminary injunction motion, which means, hey, we think we're likely to succeed on the merits of this lawsuit. Court, while it's pending, grant us preliminary relief to allow DIAG to register in Illinois and solicit contributions and speak there. And in the meantime, we'll have a fuller set of briefing, down the line at the appropriate time in this litigation. So if that motion is granted, then DIAG will be able to do just that during the pendency of the litigation.
My questions were kind of what comes next. So you filed the preliminary injunction. Can they just settle? Do they go to trial? How does this work? And who exactly are you suing?
Yeah. We're suing Alexei Giannoulis, who is the Illinois Secretary of State. He is the
Okay.
official responsible for enforcing the statute.
Okay.
We're asking the court to enjoin him or to stop him from enforcing the statute. If we win on a preliminary basis, of course, the statute is still on the books until the case comes to a conclusion. If we win at the conclusion of the suit, we will receive a permanent injunction, which will enjoin the state from enforcing the statute going forward. But that law will remain on the books, although it will be unenforceable. Only the legislature could repeal the law through further legislation. Of course, the legislature could do that at any time. So if they do that during the pendency of the litigation, then maybe some of our claims will become moot. I have seen that strategy used by state defendants before. I tend to think it's not going to be used in this case because the politics are out of alignment there, right? Illinois has a predominantly Democratic Party makeup to its legislature. The Secretary of State is a Democratic Party member. So I would expect the state to fight this litigation. And in that case, the next steps would be a briefing schedule entered by the court on the preliminary injunction motion. So they'll have an opportunity to oppose our motion, and then we will file a brief further in support of our motion, responding or replying to their opposition, and we will seek oral arguments on that as well. The court will decide that either on the papers or through arguments. Currently, there is a deadline for the state to answer our complaint set for February 20th. And the state will either file an answer or, more likely, a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, in which case we would oppose that according to a briefing schedule, and there could be oral argument on that as well. But typically what happens when you file a preliminary injunction motion is that the court must decide that motion first because you're seeking what's essentially emergency relief.
More questions.
So if you guys do end up having to go to litigation and you do win a permanent injunction on them enforcing this statute, is it just a permanent injunction on them enforcing the statute on DIAG, or is it they cannot enforce this statute anymore on anyone?
That's a great question, and I can get as nerdy as you like in my answer. Um, there are some recent Supreme Court cases regarding what's called universal injunctions. There's further debate about whether a universal injunction is the same as a statewide injunction or whether that's different, or whether we can only seek relief with respect to our own clients. We have sought what's called facial relief. We think that the statute is unconstitutional with respect to anybody in all of its applications, right? Not just as it's applied to our client DIAG. And so we are asking the court to permanently enjoin the statute with respect to everyone, including third parties who are not before it. That's one of the issues that will be litigated in this case, I assume. But speaking practically, if we get an injunction only as to DIAG, then the statute will be effectively a dead letter, and it would take some real chutzpah for the state to enforce it against anyone else.
Do you have any idea what, I mean, and this is just like hypothetical, do you have any idea if you got to the point of litigation, what could their defense of this statute be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give them any good ideas. I don't think they have any good ideas. Um, they might bring the kind of fraud argument that Cori mentioned earlier. They might bring a kind of quasi-trademark justification, which is, Democrat means something and only the party, can use that word, or else there'll be confusion in the donor marketplace as to who's the actual Democratic Party or not. I don't see that trademark style argument being effective because here we have a group that's saying we are lifelong Democrats and former Democrats and politically homeless Democrats who disagree with the official party on this set of issues, right? I don't see a donor possibly being confused about that when they're telling them we are not the party, we disagree with the party, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask just a couple like procedural, it's not law procedural, but I'm assuming DIAG reached out to Fire and then Fire evaluated the case and said, yes, we'll take the case. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works generally. I can't speak to any attorney-client privileged communications, of course, but oftentimes we will get cases submitted to us in a variety of ways from a variety of people, whether the people who are directly involved and have had a First Amendment violation or at least a perceived violation, and they want to see whether they have a case. Or we have contacts at other organizations who send us cases that they can't take on themselves. Or we see something in the news and we'll reach out and say, hey, we'd like to speak to you more about this. Would you like to have a meeting with us? So cases come to us in any and all directions. And then, of course, we do our due diligence, both with respect to potential claims and defenses, and we speak to the prospective clients and do a little bit of vetting on them. Are they who they say they are? Do they have any criminal history that might come to light that they might be embarrassed by? All that kind of stuff. And we discuss it amongst ourselves as litigators and staffers, and we take it to our board for approval. And once all the boxes of our internal process are checked, we prepare the lawsuit and file it.
So if there are listeners or others who feel like they might have had an issue, they could reach out. How do people reach out?
Our website is fire.org, and we have a specific page for case submissions. It's fire.org/alarm. So basically,
Oh,
pull the fire
got
alarm
it.
and send your
Full
case
fire
to
alarm.
us.
Got it. Okay. That was clever.
Yeah,
Perfect.
thanks.
Thank you so much for bringing us up to date on this case. And it sounds like your first day or the first day that a response needs to be is coming up soon. So February 20th?
That's right.
Perfect. Okay. Lauren, Cori, any other questions or thoughts?
I mean, I would like to ask like broader
Go for
cultural
it.
stuff, but I'm not sure that you're even allowed to talk to us about stuff like that because you know
Why don't you ask and we'll see where it goes?
in the last few years in academia broadly, anyone who expresses gender critical views is at such a high risk to even if they don't lose their position, they lose their career momentum. They lose opportunities, including really important speaking opportunities, publishing opportunities. And while there have been individuals like Glenna Goldis, who created the Gender Critical Law Society, there really has not been any organization that wants to stake its reputation on defending these types of apostates. And I know Carol Hooven with formerly with Harvard was maybe one of the most notable cases of these. Like, I'm just shocked that fire doesn't even have a whole division working this issue. Can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, well, with respect to cases we take or don't take, we kind of take them as they come to us, right?
Yeah.
I can talk about some academic freedom work that we have done. On this issue in particular, you speak of apostates, and I imagine you're talking about gender critical professors who are in blue states or blue universities primarily, right?
Yeah, all universities are pretty much blue unless they're founded by a conservative pastor, right?
But it's not hard to imagine on the reverse side, right? A gender supporting, women's studies or queer studies professor or whatever in a red state that's being attacked by the DeSantis administration or by the Abbott administration, say, right? So
Wait,
I can give you
it's not hard to imagine that.
it's not hard to imagine that. I mean, currently Texas A&M is stripping any mention of gender or race or whatever from its curriculum because of a law passed in Texas and signed by Abbott, and because of policies that state university systems are putting into place to implement that law. I can give you some examples of FIRE's advocacy for academic freedom across the political spectrum. Doesn't have to do with gender issues the way that your question raises. But for example, we are suing to enjoin the Stop Woke Act in Florida as a violation of academic freedom. We have a plaintiff there who teaches the history of race relations in America, Professor Novoa, and she wants to continue to teach, including from her own publications on that issue. And she is being chilled from doing so because of the so-called Stop Woke Act. We just won a great victory for academic freedom at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in Seattle. We have a professor at the University of Washington, Stuart Regis, who was encouraged to put a land acknowledgement statement in his syllabus to allegedly make his classroom more welcoming for students. And instead, he parodied or satirized the university's own land acknowledgement statement in his syllabus.
Wait,
And
wait,
he
I need to know his name.
Yeah,
his
we
What's
need.
his,
his name?
his name is Stuart Regis. The case is Regis versus Cauce, Cauce. Anna Marie Cauce is the president of the University of Washington, so she was the first named defendant in that litigation. But Stuart Regis is the professor, Reges, and it went to the Ninth Circuit. He faced termination. He had an ongoing threat of termination even after a nearly year-long investigation that he faced. They scrubbed his syllabus and replaced it with a censored version online. They created a shadow course offering for any students who felt so offended by his mockery of the land acknowledgement statement that they felt they could no longer learn from him. Although they never polled the students who switched classes as to what their actual reason for switching was. The professor who taught that second section was known as an easier grader and allowed for grading resubmissions after corrections were made to their work. He also taught his course asynchronously, whereas Professor Regis met in person at I think 8:30 a.m. or some time when students are not apt to wake up and go to class. So, we brought that litigation on behalf of Stuart Regis and his right to academic freedom. He was the victim of retaliation by his employer because of his protected speech and viewpoint discrimination, and all under a vague and overbroad anti-harassment policy. He didn't harass anybody, and they punished him as if he did.
So you're seeing attacks on free speech are not just coming from one political party. They're coming from all over the political spectrum.
Well, of course, and I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to look far to see examples of that with the current administration. Sending students abroad for op-eds that they wrote. For example, we have a lawsuit pending against Marco Rubio on behalf of international students who write for the Stanford Daily student newspaper, who are chilled from writing, from speaking, because they fear if their political views are expressed, they will be subject to deportation, just like Rumesha Ozturk or Mahmoud Khalil, for example.
Do you feel like this is I mean, I'm old enough, I'm 42, to remember a time where most Americans believed strongly and passionately in the freedom of speech. Are you seeing that there's less and less tolerance for freedom of speech just in general in society? Like, are you feeling like you're getting a lot more cases that are very clearly infractions upon our freedom of speech? And is that's a I would say that's a troubling trend. And how do we fight that?
The
Is
trends are very troubling. I mean, we very much believe in the statement that's attributed to Voltaire. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to my death your right to say it, right? Walk a mile in a man's shoes, before you judge him. Sticks and stones may break my bones. There are all kinds of these sayings or adages that we're trying to remind Americans of. And when we go back to those first principles, I think we find a lot of agreement and a lot of success, at least in the abstract. The problem is that everybody believes in the freedom of speech when it's speech that they like, and they
Mhm.
find a harder time supporting the right of their ideological opponent to speak. And so we're trying to remind people through the work that we do and coming onto programs like this that, hey, if you like the freedom of speech for yourself, you must defend it when it's your enemy speaking, because otherwise, when the political winds shift, it won't be there for you any longer. I have friends, including lesbian friends, who I agree with respect to what they might call hate speech, right? Um, the problem is it's really difficult to define what hate speech is. At the time we had a Biden administration, and my friend thought the administration should be doing more to regulate speech, including so-called hate speech. And I told her, listen, Trump thinks that saying Black Lives Matter is hate speech, and he very well could be president again, right? You have this problem of who gets to define. And once you give the power to the state to ban speech based on the viewpoint of the speaker, that's game over. The political
Yeah,
winds will shift. Your opponent will be in power next, and they will use that power against you. It's just not a power the state should have.
Agreed.
agree, yeah.
Although I will say, I know it's you always create. I support free speech, except I don't think that this is an except. I would say it's an and the state doesn't have to fund certain speech. It shouldn't have to be compelled to fund certain speech. So personally, and I'm sorry, I gotta let you know one of our co-hosts is dealing with a kid issue, and she may not return to us.
I completely
Um,
understand as a parent
yeah,
myself.
uh, I for example, I'm in favor of state universities closing certain programs because I think that they probably are not worth the public funds to support them. And this does raise a speech issue because it's saying, hey, you want to remove people's employment for their speech. And in fact, I would say if it were a private institution, I wouldn't care. That's nothing to do with it. But now that I'm a citizen and my tax dollars are going towards this, I don't think that we should target individual speakers, but I think it's completely rational to say, yeah, the state doesn't need to fund this type of activity.
So
What
there's
do
a
you
lot
think?
to tease out there, right? I mean, if you have the state saying we don't want to fund women's studies or we
Yeah.
don't want to fund race studies because we think that this is DEI run amok, for example, or whatever.
Yes.
There's a very real academic freedom problem to that. I mean, you have these entire fields that have developed according to these standards that faculty put in place and that they enforce themselves. And they both have a collective right as faculty to say, who teaches and what they may teach. And also, the individual instructors have an academic freedom right against not only the state, but against their state university as well when they run
Mhm.
into trouble and face a termination or other threats because they may be out of alignment with the common wisdom or the status quo or whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, faculty need to be free to explore controversial ideas, whatever they may be, so long as they're upholding the standards of their profession, right? But then this question of, I'm a taxpayer and I don't think we should be funding certain things. Well, you could imagine a university that wants public monies to teach creationism, for example. And,
Yeah.
that's not solid biology or solid earth science or solid chemistry or, whatever. You can imagine trying to import those essentially religious views into what should be a scientific curriculum. And there needs to be some control over whether they may do that, right? I think part of the problem is where is the locus of that control? If it's with the professionals within the university system, that's one thing. If it's with the legislators who are putting their thumb on the scale and bringing a lot of power to bear and essentially jawboning universities, that's a little more of a problem. There is democratic control over K-12 curriculum, and that's why K-12 cases can be a little bit harder to litigate because teachers at the K-12 setting do not enjoy the kind of wide-ranging academic freedom that university professors do, right? But if you want to be a university professor in biology and you want to teach creationism, you're also kind of not doing the job. So that
Yeah.
the ability to police that, I think, should reside within the faculty departments or the university itself, not probably at the state level.
Yeah. So you say jawboning. I'm going to interpret that as if legislators or the governor wants to complain all of the time about these programs, and even to the point of having conversations with the regent saying these programs are terrible, do something about it. You'd say that's not a problem, but because that's just people expressing their opinions about these things. But
Well, it
as soon as
becomes it becomes a problem when it's coercive, right? So if you have a legislator or a governor saying you've got to fire this professor, otherwise we're going to have to look at your funding, that's coercion, and that is a problem under the First
sure,
Amendment for sure.
but the governor might say something like, "Oh, these identity-based programs are terrible. Um, I want you to do something about it, but fix it somehow. Um, won't somebody do something about this priest, right? Can they can do that, but as soon as maybe there's a bill that says we're going to get rid of this whole department because most of the professors are people that we hate or they criticize us. Let's get rid of that whole department. You're saying that's an overstep at that point, in your opinion?
Well, if they're doing it for a viewpoint-based or a content-based reason, that becomes subject to constitutional scrutiny, right?
Yeah.
And if they have a compelling interest in doing it, and if it's the least restrictive means of achieving their compelling interest, maybe it passes strict scrutiny. In the case you're describing, probably it doesn't, I would say,
Yeah.
because it sounds like it would be based on their disagreement with the views that are being expressed within those programs. But if it's more of a comprehensive look at, hey, we want to assess the programs that are offered in our universities. And we want to say, prepare student citizens for the future. And we think these are the best practices and best programs with which to do that. And we're going to do it in a viewpoint neutral manner and look at, some measurements of outcomes or employment, opportunities, or, what have you. That's the kind of work that's being done by universities pretty frequently to reassess whether they're remaining competitive among universities for, student choice, or whether they're doing the work of preparing citizens in our republic, our democracy. But if it's top down and if it's viewpoint driven, that becomes a much bigger problem really fast.
Interesting. All right.
Thank you so much, Gabe.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed speaking to you.
Yeah,
Sure.
we're going to keep our eye on this case. Maybe we'll call you back for an update. We're definitely
good
friends
news.
friends of DIAG. So
Yeah, no, I hope we get some good news. I hope we are successful defending their First Amendment right. And before I sign off, just want to plug the website again, fire.org. If any of your listeners like what they've heard and they want to check us out, that's where to go.
If you give them money, they will send you stuff like this every once in a while.
There you go. Thanks for the plug.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing your work.
Thank you again. Yeah, it's important stuff, and we're grateful to be able to do it with our supporters.
great. We're thankful for organizations still standing up for free speech. Thank you, Gabe.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. I want to end with a little scene straight out of Olympia, Washington. So I'm in a coffee shop with my quad shot flat white, as usual. And honestly, in many ways, Olympia and I could easily be best friends. The coffee shops, the stores that sell the little rocks and the crystals, the general vibe, it's all extremely my aesthetic. We just have to negotiate the weather and the whole sun avoidance issue thing. We were in Washington State to support the Let's Go Washington ballot initiatives because, yes, what we see now, even in deep blue states, is that people are ready to talk about parental rights, women's sports, and medical accountability. And we see that same ballot momentum showing up in Colorado and Maine. So here I am wearing my XXXY Athletics Save Girls Sports t-shirt, about 10 people in the shop, and 4 of them are visibly trans. They are visibly medicalizing. 3 of them are younger women, clearly on testosterone, and 1, a young man, on some kind of feminizing hormone. Lauren stands up to step outside, and at a volume not designed for secrecy, she says, "Don't get stabbed." Now, I might be the most hated gay in Missouri, but for those of you doing this in deep blue states on a regular basis, this cannot be easy. We see you. And I'm loving the little signals now that we can send each other. Sometimes it's subtle, a sticker on a computer, on your water bottle. Sometimes it's not that subtle, like a t-shirt. So for what it's worth, some of XXXY's best sales are coming out of blue states. So courage is bipartisan, even if the coffee shops aren't always. So stick with us, because we're going to keep trying to have this conversation where it's hard, in difficult places. Next week, we have an excellent interview lined up. We will be hearing directly from a senior leader from within the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. That's a conversation you're going to not want to miss, and one that we have a lot of prep work to do for. So be brave when you can, stay informed when you can, and always be ready to dissent. If you appreciate informed dissent, like, subscribe, and share. Thank you.